Yousef Alshammari, CEO and head of oil research at CMarkits, a senior research fellow at Imperial College London, and a very close OPEC watcher. Yousef, welcome your reactions to Russia's unilateral decision on Friday to cut their oil production by 500,000 barrels a day. I would imagine President Putin would have mentioned that on the phone to Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, their recent call. But is this expected? Is this a big departure from this unified OPEC Plus group?
Good morning, Shane, and good morning to everyone. I think in January we had a review on oil markets, and that certainly was something expected because end of 2022, it was mentioned by Minister Novak, the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, that Russia, in response to the price cap, they are going to reduce production by 500,000 barrels. So the move actually here, what we have seen is actually the action. So the plan was already there since last year. But what does that mean is it's, in a way, it could put additional hurdles on how the group will manage its agreements this year. The group is expected to meet again in June, and what we knew from the JMMC that there is no change in production policy. But now, as Russia is unilaterally making its 500,000 barrels reduction, how I just would love to see how will they, if they are planning to increase the production, especially in the second half of this year. China is expected to come back opening, and Chinese economy is expected to rebound. So what I would expect is the group is to be pumping additional barrels, especially the 2 million barrels that were cut last year. So at least to bring 500,000 barrels in the second half of this year. So I think it could complicate things a little bit. And the one thing here is that certainly OPEC Plus is there to stay, and I don't think that the group is willing to keep Russia away from its agreement. They want to have Russia continue to be on board even beyond the 2023.
And do you think does this in any way jeopardize that, or would you understand that this was not a unilateral action and it wasn't a surprise, and so for their fellow OPEC Plus members who are probably appreciate the extra little bump to oil prices, nonetheless, this would have been expected, signaled, communicated, and nobody's left thinking, oh, are we now longer in agreement?
Well, I think there will be two scenarios, Sheen. The first scenario is because there is expected slowdown in the economy, especially in the Western economies. So the latest news of the cut did not really, the markets really didn't react significantly. So if that scenario continues, especially in the first half, I think the response from the group, there will be no response. So that is, the Russian cut will have no impact on the markets. But I'm worried that if when China comes back in the second half of this year, or maybe slightly before, and how will they be able to manage any production agreements, especially production increase agreements? Certainly, in a way, it's kind of shows that there's a slight divergence in terms of the interest of OPEC Plus and Russia. For how long that divergence will be, especially if the war continues and it gets further and further complicated. So also, for how long Russia will continue with that policy, for how long will the cuts be? Still, there's no clear announcement if the cuts is 1 month, 2 months, or for the whole of 2023. So I think it adds an additional factor of complexity into the OPEC Plus agreements.
Clearly, where things are not struggling, according to the Saudi OSPs into Asia, which jumped for the first time in 6 months for March delivery, there's a lot of optimistic outlook for Asia, at least it would appear in those pricing. How do you read the Saudi OSPs into Asia for March, which actually caught most people by a little surprise?
Well, I think it's a response to an expected increase in demand, especially coming from Asian refineries. That includes, well, China here is the biggest factor, but also India, because as we know, the 80% of Saudi oil exports go to Asian refiners. So with an expected increase in deliveries, because as you know, the most of that demand will come from refineries who will need to produce much more fuels, and will sell to. That's how Aramco usually reacts to its pricing decisions. So what would that also mean is the incremental or the hikes in OSP has also come at a time where OPEC Plus is keeping its production steady. So in a way, it gives Aramco a economic advantage because it's selling less crude than what's the market is actually
But is there not a
reacting
risk
for.
there,
So
Yousef, a little risk? I mean, this is the sort of bigger question that given the amount of Russian oil now flowing into China and into India and Asia, that with the more expensive Saudi crude, that the likelihood is that the Asian customers might just take the minimum they have to take in their term requirements and go for the cheaper discounted Russian Iranian. I mean, is there, as we go forward, that these flows get bedded in, that Russian Saudi alignment could be come under a little bit of competition and stress?
Well, I still don't see a competition scene. The reason is the contracts between Saudi Arabia and Asian refiners are very much long terms, while Russian diversion of oil has been just recent, and it is expected. It's not known for how long these diversion will last. Also, the amount of oil that Russia can divert to Asia is not expected to be as much as how much Saudi Arabia can divert, because Saudi Aramco is actually the largest baseload provider for Asian refineries, and the contracts there are pretty much very much long term. In fact, as you know, China is expected to go net zero by 2060. So until that period, Saudi Aramco is expected to be the largest provider of hydrocarbons. So that's the first reason. The second issue here is that Russian oil is expected to fill stocks in China because China used to already import oil from Saudi Arabia, given the contracts that they have already signed with Saudi Aramco. So I don't expect that Russia will become a competitor for Saudi Aramco at this stage. Certainly, they can, let's say, get some of their oil into Asian refineries to fill stocks and also to get it at a much cheaper price. But I don't think they will be the main competitor, just due to the fact that the long-term contract that already signed with Saudi Aramco.
Yousef, last word for you in terms of this idea, Russia's oil cut, little impact, at least this room tends to agree with that statement. We'll post that on social. If Russia was to do this a second time, Yousef, would that be a lot more stressful for OPEC Plus? You get one free shot, but
stressful. It is already stressful, in my view, at least seen. Although I certainly agree that OPEC Plus would perhaps want to disregard perhaps the decisions taken by Russia and continue with the momentum of the agreement, because the most important thing for the group now is to keep the alliance. But I think the further that escalates, it could complicate things further, especially if we see a market reaction. So far, the reaction from the market is almost mute. But if we see prices jump to maybe $100, so then I think things can be a lot more complicated. But for now, I don't think it will really affect the coherence of the group.